Welcome to part 2 of the pre match analysis of the T20 World Cup final between India and New Zealand. In the previous part, we talked about the batsmen and the batting. Now, in this video, we're going to be talking about the bowlers and the balance in the bowling attack that these teams have. Before we get into the data deep dive, for those of you who are new to watching cricket, who haven't watched a lot of cricket or watched some cricket a long time ago and are just getting back, uh, here's a quick revision. Economy is essentially the total runs given by the total number of overs bowled, and a lower economy means a bowler is more defensive and they're better at stopping runs. Strike rate is how often a bowler picks up wickets, which is the total number of balls bowled divided by the total number of wickets taken. Again, a lower strike rate is better. At a basic level of analysis, you can look at economy and strike rate and see whether a bowler is defensive or attacking. But an issue arises that not all bowlers are the same. Some bowlers primarily bowl in the power play, and you see more runs being given there. Some bowlers bowl a lot of their balls during the middle overs, where there's relatively fewer number of runs, and some bowlers bowl in the death, where you give a lot of runs. Similarly, with wickets, power play and death overs typically have more number of wickets than in the middle overs. So, adjusting for this, we get an economy index and a strike rate index. Some other things taken into account when calculating this are the quality of league that they're playing in, a little bit of a form factor that is brought in because it accurately represents how they are doing right now, also phase wise adjustments because of the issues that we talked about earlier. So, how we determine the balance of bowlers is balance of a bowling attack is using these quadrants. Quadrant 1 is defensive bowlers, essentially a high economy index and a low strike rate index. It basically means these bowlers are stopping a lot of runs but not picking up a lot of wickets. How we determine the balance in a bowling attack are using these quadrants. Quadrant 1 is defensive bowlers. Quadrant 1 contains bowlers who are stopping a lot of runs but not picking up a lot of wickets in turn. Players who prefer bowling defensive lines and choking the opponents. On the opposite side of quadrant 1 is quadrant 3, attacking bowlers who are the exact opposite. They have a high strike rate index but a low economy index. These bowlers don't mind giving a few extra runs if it means they can come in and take wickets. Now, quadrant 4 is all rounders and part timers. Usually, you see about 4 bowlers. Usually, if you're bowling 20 overs, each bowler can only bowl 4 overs. So, most teams come in with 5 bowlers and a part timer, or maybe 2 part timers. Usually, the fifth bowler is not a full time bowler like a defensive bowler, attacking bowler, or frontline bowler. These bowlers usually perform worse than average when compared to proper bowlers. Now, quadrant 2 is really where the juice is at. Quadrant 2 has your frontline bowlers. Think Jasprit Bumrah, think Arshdeep Singh, think Mitchell Stark. These are your go-to bowlers. Every time you want a wicket, every time you're in a bad spot, you throw the ball to them, and they're gonna win. They're gonna try and win you the game. They're picking wickets more than most bowlers, and they're stopping runs better than most bowlers. So these are your frontline bowlers. Now, using this, we can get a decent idea of what kind of bowling attack each one is. Ideally, you want a balance of all of these so that you have a good squad that is capable of performing at any venue. Here we have the bowlers of both India and New Zealand. Let's analyze them separately. First, if we look at the New Zealand attack, what you will notice is this man over here, Mitchell Santner. Mitchell Santner has an extraordinary eco index. He's one of the best defensive bowlers in the world, but at the same time, he's not picking up a lot of wickets. His strike rate index is just 70.3. Similarly, Matt Henry, Lockie Ferguson, Glenn Phillips, and Cole McConkey all fall into the category of defensive bowlers. Cole McConkey and Glenn Phillips are obviously part timers, but they're performing above average and have gotten pushed into defensive bowlers. Primarily because in the Super 8s, New Zealand played all their games in Sri Lanka, during which these players were amazing utility bowlers. Now, Lockie Ferguson happens to be one of the most attacking bowlers of the pack, but he still doesn't uh, he still doesn't come above that strike rate index of 100, which means he's still not picking enough wickets to be categorized as an aggressive bowler. The only bowler who sort of comes into the only bowler who has a strike rate index of above 100 is Rachin Ravindra. Now, this might be a surprise to most of you, but Rachin Ravindra has picked up a lot of wickets in this T20 World Cup, and the form is really what's pushed him all the way here. I don't think New Zealand can rely completely on Rachin Ravindra to help them pick all of their wickets. They're still going to need a lot of help from their full-time bowlers, which is your Mitchell Santner, Matt Henry, and Lockie Ferguson. Other all-rounders like Jimmy Neesham and Daryl Mitchell find themselves in this quadrant. Now, when we talk about balance, one of the most important things that you'll see for yourself is that New Zealand don't have an aggressive bowler. They don't have an aggressive strike bowler, somebody who they can turn to when they need a wicket. We saw the downside of this twice during this World Cup. The first time against England, where England were part of a collapse, but they were able to regain because nobody in that they were about 64 for 3 and they were far behind in the game, requiring close to 100 runs in the last 10 overs. But New Zealand lacked a proper death bowler, which allowed England to bring in a fight back. And New Zealand lost a game that they really should have won. The second is the the second is the semi-final one against South Africa. Something that probably went under the radar because of Finn Allen's innings is that New Zealand allowed South Africa to score close to 100 runs after getting them for 77 for 5. Marco Janssen is not a proper batter. Yes, he played well, but the lack of an aggressive bowler stopped them from completing that South Africa collapse and getting them all out for maybe a 120 or 130 and allowed South Africa to get a fighting score. It didn't matter in the end because of Finn Allen's brilliance, but it is something that New Zealand have to be wary about. And clearly shows that this New Zealand team is more inclined towards defensive bowling than attacking bowling. Now, getting on to the Indian attack. What you'll notice here is India has a clear advantage in frontline bowlers. They have Varun Chakravarti, Ashdeep Singh, and obviously Jasprit Bumrah. Jasprit Bumrah ranks one of the highest in both the strike rate and economy indexes. Similarly, Varun Chakravarti has one of the highest strike rate indexes, and Arshdeep Singh is also capable of doing both at a very high level. Now, this alone grants India a huge advantage when compared to New Zealand. Add to that, India have two all-rounders who are exceeding their category. Hardik Pandya, who's done incredibly well as an economical bowler, and Akshar Patel, who's moved beyond that all-rounder category and has an eco index of 101.8. Additionally, his strike rate index is pretty high for a bowler who's primarily used as a defensive option. Now, India have a sixth bowling option in Shivam Dube, who's an aggressive option, but you know he's going to leak a lot of runs, especially because his eco index is at just 86.2. So overall, when you compare the two sides, you can see that India has a more balanced bowling attack, and even their defensive and attacking options seem to be leaps and bounds above New Zealand. But where New Zealand can bridge the gap is their strategy. New Zealand have been brilliant when it comes to strategy. Despite having a small population size, they've consistently found themselves as contenders in every single ICC tournament. They've been great judges of conditions, lines and lengths, the right areas to bowl, and they've executed it perfectly. We talked a little bit about that in the previous video, where we reviewed the New Zealand versus South Africa game. So if you haven't seen that, I would recommend checking that out. So overall, India has a huge advantage when it comes to bowling. That was the video. I hope you enjoyed. Stay tuned for part 3, where we talk about the match conditions at Ahmedabad and the final game plan, and I will give my edge and predictions for who's going to win tomorrow's game.